Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meaningful Conversations, one of my favorite programs with livinghealthylist.com. My name is Susan Axelrod. I am the confidence coach. I am the moderator for today's conversation, the topic of which is resilient health. My dear friend Cornelia Stephanie often says, your health is your wealth. And I couldn't agree more. I honestly cannot think of a more important topic than how we want to be, can be, and must be resilient in our own physical health. Personally, in my own enlightenment journey, and part of the way I became the confidence coach is that I began to focus on my physical health many, many years ago. So many years ago, I can't even remember, but I was in my 30s. And that led to my spiritual awakening and opening the energetic pathways for me to be really more in my intuitive space. So I really am delighted to be having this conversation with you all today. Meaningful conversations. Why are they important? This program is offered to encourage actual conversation between and among people. Sometimes today we get stopped, we get stuck, and we get blocked from actually having conversation. And so today we're bringing you some experts and we will be engaging. And with the guests who are with us today, we invite you to engage and participate in this meaningful conversation as well. I am going to go around the room and introduce the panelists now, and they will each have just a minute or so to just do a brief introduction of themselves. Tom Petty, hello, friend. I'm happy to see
Hello.
you. Welcome to
Good morning.
today's meaningful conversation. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks. And hi, everybody. I am Tom Petty. I'm not that guy. You don't want to hear me sing. So I look a little different during the daytime is what I tell people. But I'm Tom Petty. I'm the psoriasis guy. So you can find me on Instagram and other places as the psoriasis guy. I teach people who have psoriasis how to heal themselves naturally and get off the toxic medications that a lot of the medical community is offering us. And those medications that are being offered to us and are heavily marketed actually make us sick. So I figured out how to heal myself after 50 years of misery. And that's what I do, is teach other people to do the same thing.
Thank you, Tom. Good to have you. I've personally interviewed you on my platform and my podcast, and you know how I feel about the work that you do. I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks.
Elizabeth Sherman, welcome to Meaningful Conversations. Just a minute on who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name is Elizabeth Sherman, and I have a podcast called Done with Dieting. And what I do is I work with women in midlife who are done with dieting, but still want to maybe lose some weight. But more important than that, because we're in midlife, most of my clients know that they aren't looking for a six pack. They just want to feel better. They just want to feel like their former younger selves. They want to have the energy. They want to stop having cravings. They want to sleep through the night and just feel energetic again. And so what I do is I help folks through being able to understand how food, exercise, sleep, and stress impacts how we feel, so that what we can then do is do the things that our body is looking for, as opposed to following a strict set of rules that someone else has dictated to us. So we create our own plan, and that way we are more apt to adhere to it. So that's in a nutshell what I do. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram at eSherman68.
Great. I also work with women, in particular, women in the second half of life. So, all about everything you said. Really looking forward to this conversation about resilient health with you as well.
Yeah.
And now I'm delighted to introduce our third panelist, Sofia Adams. Welcome. Happy to have you here. Just take a minute to say who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much. I'm really thankful for this opportunity to share my naturopathic perspective on resilient health. And as a naturopathic doctor, I help people recognize what underlying imbalances or health factors are in their way of being able to reach that resilient health, or be able to provide a variety of holistic recommendations to really help them recognize and be able to provide lifestyle recommendations, homeopathic remedies, and as well as botanical interventions to really help them reach that goal of stimulating their own self-healing mechanisms to be able to reach that balanced and healthy state and well-being. My practice right now is completely virtual, so I'm able to reach a variety of people and educate them all over on ways to really optimize their well-being. And I run my practice here out of my farm in Southeast Iowa. And I love being a part of this group here with Living Healthy List, because I'm able to learn even more aspects of health and really be able to expand my ways on how to be vital. So I really enjoy being part of this group so far.
It's so great. Thanks. Good to have you. It's so funny for those of us who are among the experts on Living Healthy List. We have fun learning from each other. Everyone else is kind of ancillary to the conversation. So I'm already excited to be having this conversation with you all today. The topic today is resilient health. And I do want to give each of our panelists a few minutes before we get into conversation. And I am going to be a timekeeper here to talk about the nature of how you work with your clients, especially as it relates to resilience, bouncing back, doing it again, figuring it out, working it through. And so this is our opportunity for our guests and our viewers to go a little bit deeper with our panelists to understand what they do, how they do it, how resilience comes in, and then we will begin our conversation. So Tom, let's start with you. How does resilience come into Well, I already know the answer to this, so I'm excited to give you the opportunity. You are an example of sheer resilience. So take a few minutes. I'll be the timekeeper to really talk about your work and, how resilience comes into play.
Sure. And I also want to echo what Sofia said. She used the word self-healing, and that's what I'm all about. I just turned 60. I've had severe psoriasis all my life, and really had no good results from anything that the medical community offered me. A little bit of history: 10 years ago, my wife got very ill with a mystery illness. They couldn't figure out what it was, but she started having stroke-like symptoms. They thought she had multiple sclerosis. They thought she had brain cancer. They could see lesions in her brain, but they didn't know what was going on with her. And from what they could see, it looked like she was probably not going to survive, because she was getting worse and worse and worse, until one day when she woke up, she was completely paralyzed on her left side. So the spin forward, I started doing a lot of research online, trying to figure out what was going on with her. And I told all the neurologists and all the people that were poking and prodding her that I thought what was going on with her was some sort of an external factor. It was either toxins or it was food. And food, I believed, was what was causing her issues. And the doctors were, oh, no, it can't be food. Absolutely not. But we don't know what it is. We don't know what's going on with her. Ultimately, it took them 3.5 years to diagnose an autoimmune disease that was attacking her brain. I have an autoimmune disease that attacks my skin. So we actually went through a journey where we cleaned up our diet. We kicked the standard American diet, the SAD, to the curb. And Joanne's disease went away. She has continued to improve over the last 10 years. She was in a wheelchair. She was using a walker later. She was using a cane later. Now she doesn't use any walking aids. So the resilience here is that food heals. Some foods can make you sick, but food heals. And that's what is something that we are not taught, that we can actually heal ourselves. And, Hippocrates a couple thousand years ago is let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. He was absolutely right. It's food is what can heal a lot of diseases. And that's what resilience means to me.
Oh my gosh, I just wrote down, Tom, food heals. What could be more simple than that?
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Blessings on you and your wife and your resilient health journey. And I'm looking forward to your part of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Good job staying on time. Elizabeth, let's go to you.
Yeah. So whenever I think about resilience, I really think about failure, which seems to be the polar opposite, right? But when I think about failure, what happens is we aren't resilient because we make the failure mean that we are failures or that we aren't meant to be doing whatever the thing is. And so one of the things that I teach my clients a lot, and I'll probably be writing for in the Living Healthy list, is the idea is that the quicker we can move through a failure and move on, the more resilient we can be, the more successful we can be. And so when we think about women, or women is the population that I serve, that we feel like we always have to be perfect. And there's no place for perfection and failure in the same place. But whenever we're trying to be healthier, whenever we're trying to do something new, we have to be a beginner. And when we're a beginner, that ensures that we are going to make mistakes. And so what happens is, for many of my clients, they have this idea that they need to be perfect in order to achieve a result. And for most people, what happens is we aren't perfect. We are human beings. And so the more we can do, well, not expect perfection from ourselves and do the best that we can and learn from it so that we can do better next time. How did I do on my time?
Fantastic. I was just writing a note. By the way, if I'm looking down, it's not that I'm not paying attention. I'm writing notes. As I said at the beginning, I'm here to learn. It's so great. So I wrote down, Elizabeth, interesting points. For sure, adults, starting something new, we're taught to succeed. So when we start something new, a failure sort of feels like not an option, but we fail. And so I love that. Thank you so much. That was fun, but I'm not in the conversation point yet. So let me zip it for a second.
We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that. Okay, so Sofia, welcome.
Yes. So I believe resiliency really is a potential that we all possess. It just takes, I think, awareness and willpower to really get to that balanced state. As a naturopath, I believe that we are self-regulating beings, almost like in a homeodynamic state. I hate to say homeostasis because I think we are just always kind of on that teeter-totter going back and forth. And so I believe that if we are aware of the determinants of our health that are out of balance, like we've kind of talked about already today, those areas of our health, we're then able to recognize when we are more susceptible to then get out of that resiliency state and recognize what triggers are then going to be able to really overcome. And then our resiliency will be higher when we're able to then bring that self-awareness to tap into ourselves to then be able to overcome. So if we don't, like Tom said, if we don't recognize those foods, if we don't recognize our environment, if we don't recognize, our minds being in that balanced state, then we'll have a more difficult time being resilient. The stressors and the triggers that are then going to come our way are going to be more harder to overcome. So I know in naturopathic medicine, we have over 40 different health determinants that impact our health. And so it really is my job to really help people identify those and bring my clients that perspective, that health change perspective, and be able to then help strategize a plan with them to overcome. So I know if you're in a certain situation that puts you in a vulnerable position, then our vital force, that self-healing mechanism, like Tom said too, is going to be working harder and harder to then compensate.
Oh, wow. Okay. I have a lot to say here, but I'm only moderating, not speaking. So before I continue, I want to remind our guests that before we end, I'm going to be inviting you to offer a couple of tips. And so you can have that in your mind. And I'll come back to that at the end. Sophia, okay, I just want to say one thing. I love everything about coming into conscious awareness. It's the first stage of my own coaching methodology, conscious awareness. So I want to welcome our guests today. I'm so delighted to see you. I know some of you well, and I don't know some of you. You're all welcome here. I want to ask you right away if there's anything that you've heard that has brought anything up for you in terms of your own resilient health. Any questions you have of our experts today, please unmute yourself and ask, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. Anyone? All right. In that case, I have something to say. I have things to ask. To all of our panelists, I guess I want to say that there's so much, I just mentioned it to Sophia, there's so much about this that stems in being in the awareness. Tom, through the difficulty and deficit that you experienced with your wife in particular, but then you had your own positive outcomes, you came to awareness about the use of food. So the idea of resilience there, food heals, I just want to ask you to speak to this a little bit, that, how do you, the play on being in the awareness of the use of food in healing, talk a little bit about this, your growing awareness of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been a very long journey, and it wasn't until I started doing a lot of research and a lot of reading from smarter people than I am. But, I never really paid that much attention to what I ate. I tried to eat a salad and tried to eat reasonably healthy, but never really thought about it. But when those of us that have psoriasis, there's 8 million of us in the country. It's a very visible, it's a very ugly disease. And most of us who have it are ashamed. We feel at its mercy because we get terrible flare-ups that we don't know where they come from. We don't know why it's happening. We don't know how long they're going to last. And, is it ever going to get better? And so there's a real mental thing that's going on with us because we aren't in control of our own bodies. So it's very, very frustrating for us. And we just sort of learn to cope with it, just live with it. And really the medical community isn't telling us much different. It's like, sorry, you got psoriasis. It sucks. Deal with it. We don't have answers for it. So to feel that we can have control over that and to be resilient about it is something that just doesn't even come up. So when I finally had that aha, and then with my wife too, it's like when we cleaned up our diet, she got better, but suddenly I got better. And it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? My body changed because of what we were eating and what we weren't eating. That there really is hope. There really is hope that there is something that I have control over that is going to make a positive difference in my body.
I wrote down a few notes here, and that is sometimes resilience comes from research, and
Mhm.
also to feel you can have control, especially when it comes to your health, can also lead to resilience. Elizabeth or Sophia, do you have anything to? I see heads shaking. Elizabeth, you're unmuted. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, so a lot of what Tom said actually resonated with me a lot, because I think that similarly, women in midlife going through perimenopause and menopause are not given a lot of support around their symptoms. And we're told by our doctors to put up or shut up, that there isn't really a lot that you can do about it, or take this medication. And quite honestly, there is a lot that we can do as far as lifestyle factors go, in terms of exercise, sleep, stress management, and eating, that all contribute to how our body responds. So all of those inputs, our body will have a hormonal response to it. And so what happens is, though, so many of us have been living in this world of diet culture, where we're taught that we should not pay attention to our bodies. Like, how many women did fen-phen and HCG and that, remember that Olestra diet where you ate potato chips and like it was supposed to process the fat out of it? Like, we knew that that wasn't good for us, yet we denied our own knowing in lieu of what, like, science was telling us that we should be doing, right? And I think that one of, going back to awareness, Susan, you were talking about it, and Sophia as well, that awareness is so important. And so one of the things that we really want to do is we want to start paying attention to, how does food make me feel? How, when I eat this thing, what happens? When I exercise this way, what happens? When I get good enough sleep, what are the implications of that? And so we can really start to see how all of those different lifestyle behaviors that we make influences our health.
Yeah, and influences our resilience, the resilient ability to come back, do it again, do it over. Tom, as I said, I've interviewed him. I know a pretty deep level of his story, decades, like literally decades of life. Sophia, the whole idea of the 40 different health determinants to identify, it seems like we're beginning to touch on some of these here, yes? You're
Yes,
mute. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, the food has been mentioned, the movement, the sleep, light is a big one too, our posture, even our inborn determinants, things that we were born with, those also make us more susceptible to being less vulnerable or be able to be more resilient. There's, oh gosh, there's just, yes, there's so many. When it comes to our water intake, hydration as well is a big one. When it comes to influencing our movement, influencing our immune system, influencing lymphatics, influencing cardiovascular system. I mean, just that determinant right there could play a role in so many avenues. And so to disregard, Elizabeth, you mentioned too, the signs and symptoms were actually, modern medicine is trying to suppress them so we don't recognize them. And I am a big proponent on what is going on right now. What are your symptoms? What are your signs? Those keynotes really help me be able to identify what botanicals or what homeopathic remedies would even be essential to be able to balance out the frequency in the body and be able to hopefully get us towards leaning towards a more health curve, right? Heading into that transition to lead more into a more healthy lifestyle. And again, our lifestyle is the biggest thing. I think that 80% of our things really can be changed and impacted with lifestyle. And it's just these supplemental things are in addition to what we're already doing.
I really, truly am a living, breathing example of this. I was a type A. I was 25 pounds or more heavier than I am now. God gave me, and my parents' genes gave me a good structure, as I say it. And so I'm blessed in that way. I was never, I was big for me. I was sedentary. Denise mentioned potato chips. I'd be on the couch eating a bag of chips still, but now I work out more. Now my body movement, now I'm aware of my intake. Now I'm aware of the signs and symptoms of which Sofia just spoke. And so I really truly am like a living, breathing example. I guess I never thought of it this way before, of resilient health. I never thought of it in those terms. So thank you, Living Healthy List, for this meaningful conversation. Again, I want to invite our guests, if anybody has any questions, raise your hand, participate in the conversation. What do you struggle with? What does resilience mean for you in your own health? What is resonating here with you today? If you're viewing this video by recording, please type in #replay. And by all means, add your questions, add your comments. We must discuss. So hold on, I have to go look at my notes. I've taken so many notes. Elizabeth, the whole thing on done with dieting, the whole thing on, I wrote it down when you said that, that things are in your control versus out of your control information. I feel like it's a little bit perpetrated on us. Sometimes in your case, you work with women. Sometimes as women, we feel not believed, etc. So I feel like that's a really important thing. All of us are talking about what's in our control and how can you get healthier if you don't get in control, right?
Yeah. So control is actually, we think that we have control. So when there's a diagram called locus of control, right? There are things that we don't care about that happen in the world that that aren't within our control. And then there are things that we care about that we don't have control over. There are things that we care about that we have influence over. And then there are things that we have control over. When we think about control, we really don't have control over a lot. The things that we have control over are our thoughts, our feelings, and our responses. Everything else we don't have control over. We might be able to influence it. So we don't even necessarily have 100% control over what we eat or our health or like how we exercise or all of those things. We really only have influence over those things. And what I mean by that is, like, I can go to a party and think that I have control over my eating, but what happens when none of the foods there are within my diet? Yeah, I can bring the foods with me, but so we don't have 100% control over those things. But we really want to exert influence when we can. And I think that goes back to resilience, is not then on the other side of it, beating ourselves up for not being perfect. So not beating ourselves up and saying, wow, you really screwed everything up. So now we may as well just eat everything in the house. No, you can always do, I don't want to say do better, but it all adds up.
Come
right?
back. You can always, either come back or go forward. It's like, I have a big grin because my coaching, my confidence coaching is, I call it 100% in your control. I love the synergy of the experts on the livinghealthylist.com because there's so much basis and deliciousness in the synergy of our messages, our work, and our impact. So Elizabeth, to your point, you mentioned earlier the idea about failure, being the opposite of resilience. But as we learn in meditation, bring the puppy back, right? Bring the puppy back. So to your point, the trial and error, the failure isn't really failure. It's just now. It's just what's happening now. Some of us talked about eating potato chips. It's like, well, you could say I'm never going to eat potato chips again, but maybe that's not exactly realistic. To your point, I wrote down thoughts, feeling, and responses. as you just said, these are the things that are really in our control. So Sophia, I was looking at my notes again, and I had circled self-regulating. You had talked about the idea that the basis is self-regulating. I feel like that's coming into play here.
Yes, I think that Samuel Hahnemann, the father of homeopathy, really worded this really well. He said that we have this dynamic force, and he called it the vital force. We all possess it, we all have it, we just need to be able to tap into it. And he just really was able to this self-regulating force that we have, it all comes down to being able to recognize, be able to feed ourselves, be able to feed ourselves mentally as well, having the people in our lives being able to impact also, having those social circles, having nature. Nature has these biophoton frequencies that are able to help enhance our self-regulating mechanisms. And this dynamic force that he mentioned, when we don't have that vitality, we die, we decay. And so we need to nourish it to be able to thrive. And I think that's really a big part of his focus and his idea on that self-regulating mechanism.
Thank you so much. Kimberly has her hand up. Kimberly, sorry, I have lots to say in response to Sophia, but I want to call on you. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, you know, a lot of times I think we talk about resilience, but we don't talk about grace. And we can't have resilience without grace, and we can't have grace without resilience. And I like to think of resilience as being the act of doing. So it's the physical, it's the strength, it's the masculine energy, it's the force that we have against or with something. Whereas grace is really the being. It's the feminine side of it. And so we want to beat ourselves up. We want to be in resilience to what we've done or what we haven't done, the choices that we've made or we haven't made. And that's fine. We can be in resilience. We can do it. We can achieve it. But we also have to have the grace of the other side of that, and accepting and being in the place that we are sometimes, because you know, as we talk about all of this, there's a lesson in all of it. And choosing the perspective and what that lesson looks like, that's where that awareness comes in. So here I am. Here's where I've gotten to in my life through, you know, a list of choices, or maybe, you know, conscious choices sometimes, and sometimes unconscious choices. And we can be resentful and hateful of those choices, or we can accept the choices that we've made and then make the choice to move forward in a different way. And to me, that's that we're being resilient and making those decisions. We're making a conscious choice, but then we also give ourselves grace for the things that don't necessarily work out in the way that we plan, because life is always uncertain. So that was all I was going to add.
That's beautiful. Luann, hold on one second. I'll call on you. Kimberly, thank you so much. To everyone watching this video, I invite you to replay that. So Kimberly, my first book is titled Your Job is to Be. And the first shirt I created in my new merchandise shop, it says Your Job is to Be. I love everything about Grace. I love everything about the way you've shared with us. Thank you so much. Luann, hi.
Hi. Thank you, Kimberly. That was beautiful. I love that as well. And I wanted to drive the point home based on a discussion I had with a young physician who attended one of my weekend retreats. And we were talking about the word resilience. And she has a very negative connotation to resilience, in essence that what in her experience in the medical arena, that resilience was about toughing it through, like buck up, little camper, and you got to do this no matter what, and that they abuse the human beings based on using that word resilience. So in her experience, what she said actually was the word resilience has been bastardized. And I was like, whoa, or demonized. And I'm like, whoa, talk to me more about that. And so that grace is exactly it, right? That grace is exactly the combination with the conversation of resilience that is so important, so people don't just bury the struggle underneath the word resilience and get sicker because of it. What this woman, to the extreme that this woman noticed, is that 6 women in the emergency room that they worked in all miscarried babies in a short period of time because they weren't taking care of their bodies, because they were pressured to be resilient. So that grace has to be there to be a piece of this, in my opinion.
Pressured to be resilient. This is a meaningful conversation for me because I don't think of resilience as being pressured. I think of it as keeping going in a good way. So that's very interesting, Luann.
And I always, and I've said this before on one of our conversations this year, is that I've always looked at the word as resilience. Resilience yourself. Take a step back, sit with what's going on, digest it, respond to it, cry, whatever you need to do, but come back to center, and you'll much more likely be able to look at the situation with a better perspective from that place of center. So resilience is how I like to look at the word.
Interesting. As regards our health, the basis of this conversation today, very interesting points being made here. I'm frantically typing notes to keep up with our conversation. Tom, what are your thoughts? What responses do you have to any of this?
Yeah, so kind of going back to what Elizabeth said, the locus of your control and what we have control over in our lives. I think one of the things that's really frustrating is that we get such mixed messages about what's healthy. You know, I talk about how my shopping habits have drastically changed because the 90% of the grocery store, I don't go down those aisles, you know, but those aisles are the ones that are screaming, oh, this is healthy. This is healthy. You know, get a box of Cheerios because that's healthy. And the louder that foods scream that they're healthy, the less healthy they are. You know, an apple doesn't scream I'm healthy. It just is. So it's the foods that are screaming the healthy. And you were talking about diets earlier too. I think one of the stupidest diets that's ever been shoved down our throats is the low fat craze. It's a horrible diet because it drives eating carbs. And so, yeah, and then you just typed in, you know, no brown foods. That's what I talk about with psoriasis is stop eating the brown foods, you know, the pastas and the breads and, you know, all of that stuff that's brown sodas, all of those kinds of things aren't healthy for us. So we have control, but we're also being fed these mixed messages about what's healthy, what we should be doing. And we're not being educated on what we really should do to self-heal, self-regulate, as Sofia was saying.
Interesting. So interesting. I feel like I want to make you a graphic, Tom, that says an apple doesn't scream I'm healthy. It just is. Sofia.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to elaborate on that. Well, not on the apple part, but on what Tom just said.
Yeah.
It really makes it as though we really have to be individualized too with our diets. We can't just say a diet, this one works for everyone. We really do have to pick and choose what is the best. And so, you know, every person is unique and we have to honor that with our food too.
Yeah, I just started to write down what you said. That, I mean, Elizabeth, that must be the basis of, everything you do as well. Every person is, oh, I wrote it down. I didn't post it yet. To be individualized for our diet, but that's a small d. I might say for our intake, right?
Yeah. So like Sofia said, there's no one diet that's right for everybody. It's just a matter of figuring out the diet with a small d. Diet with a big D is a prescribed diet, right? Diet with a small d is just the foods that make up what I eat on a regular basis. And so, yeah, like one of the things that women always come to me about is like, can I eat this? Or is this good? Like, instead of pasta, can I eat chickpea pasta? And it's like, I don't know, like try it, see how you feel. And if it works, great. I'm not the boss of you. I'm, your coach, I'm your friend. I will walk with you in this process, but I'm not going to tell you no. Yeah.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. And that's part of what I teach too, is that you have to have a food log. You have to write down anything that goes into your mouth, and you have to monitor it because it's, what works for me may not work for somebody else. And so you have to keep track of it, which is hard because, it's like, what did you have for breakfast last month? I don't know. But you have to keep track of it so that you can figure out, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that because now I've got consequences that I don't like. And so I need to figure that out.
We're talking about food here. And also, I have learned so much in my conversations with Tom. And of course, we are, in fact, if there's one thing we do every day, it's eat. And some of us all day. But per what Tom just said, and what we're talking about here, Elizabeth, as well, exercise, it's the same. Everything doesn't work the same way for every person. And so we're talking about being in conscious awareness. We're talking, I wrote down, Elizabeth, you're the boss of you. I say that all the time in my work. You're in charge, you're in charge, you're in charge. So I wrote down what you said, you're the boss of you. And I wrote down be in charge. And so, somebody running is really great and somebody else running isn't really great. And so, to the point of resilience, Denise and I are also private messaging a conversation because this is so fun. The idea of resilience and how it is that you keep going forward. Denise, why don't you ask your question? Wait, you're muted still.
I unraised my hand. I love this conversation because it's personal to each one of us. We're always in a different stage or phase of life. And I think what I've noticed in my life is, you kind of get through a phase. It seems like every 10 years there's a new phase. And as soon as you kind of figure it out, it changes. So what are some of the thoughts that our panel has? How do you stay resilient on this journey? Because it is, your health journey is through life. You don't just kind of figure it out and that's it. It does change. So how would you recommend for our listeners, those of us that are here today and those who are listening to the replay, what are some of the things that we can do to stay on top of the journey and to really stay committed?
Well, Denise is moving us into the tips section. I also want to just note that Kimberly brought up the same idea, which is lasting change in the context of how do we get into and stay in lasting change? What underlies this? So why don't we do a few tips to the point of how do we be resilient? How do we come back or go forward? How do we get into lasting change? Elizabeth, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about eating in this time together, but I want to illustrate a story about exercise that when I started exercising, I've gone through so many different phases. I was a bodybuilder, I was a runner, there was a time that I was doing yoga, and I was all in. And I think when I was in each of those stages, I was like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And when I look back at all of those different phases, what happened is I was kind of open to what could possibly come next. And why I think that that's important when we're talking about resilience is not being tied to that this is the right way for me forever. Like when I was doing heavy weightlifting, I thought that that was going to carry me until I was 80, because you know how you see on social media, like those older women who are 80 years old and they're lifting like really heavy weights. And I was like, that's going to be me. But what I found was that my joints, just my body didn't do well after that. My body wasn't resilient with the stress that I was putting on it. And so being open to the feedback, going back to awareness, being open to the feedback that your body is giving you and being willing to pivot and try something different and go from there and understand that what I found right now is probably guaranteed to change.
You caught me. I'm typing. Be open to the feedback that your body is giving you. I love this. Thank you so much. Whoops. Sorry. Thank you so much. I was on the same exercise situation that you're on. So, Sophia, what about you? What are a few tips that you might offer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think creating a goal, number one, like what is your goal at this point in your life? What's your goal 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Each one is going to have its own needs, its own people that need to help, its own, creating a goal is going to really stimulate your sights and your focus and the perspective that you want to have. And so I think creating a goal, short-term and long-term, is going to really be able to, it's going to modify throughout your life. And so, grandkids come about, right? So perspectives change, and or school, right? School is coming about around the corner, in August here. And so you're going to have a different needs and wants. And so I think creating a goal for every season is excellent, as well as every year and long-term too.
I do love this tip because so many clients find me and they don't feel confident in the goals that they've set, but they haven't revisited them. And so often we set goals, we don't achieve them. But if you stay current in your goal setting and goal attainment, and I talk about the vision that you see, that you can envision. In the beginning, for me, honestly, to your point, Sophia, my goal was just getting into a gym. I wanted to get off anxiety medication. And then my doctor said, if you want to get off medication, go to a gym. So I wasn't like Elizabeth, lifting weights, like I was just like, get into a gym, get on a treadmill. So I love this idea of setting goals at the short term and long term. Denise, did you have a question?
Just wanted to add to that because, other than, weight loss goals, I think when it comes to our health and wellness, that's one of the last things that we think about setting a goal for. We set a goal for, we want to go on vacation. We want to have X amount of money. We want X, this type of success, this type of business. And setting goals for your health and wellness, if you don't have those, none of those other things can actually fall into place. So I appreciate, Sophia, that setting goals that you mentioned, like setting these goals first, really is essential to making the other goals successful as well.
And to the point of resilience, sometimes it takes resilience to stick to our goals. Tom, what's on your mind? What tip might you share to be in this resilient place with regard to your health?
Sure. And we're talking about goals. And earlier at the beginning, we were joking about, well, I'm never going to eat potato chips for the rest of my life, as a goal. I think it's important to have micro goals. Set a goal that I'm not going to eat potato chips today. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow, but today I'm not going to eat potato chips. Today I'm going to eat whatever it is that I'm going to eat. I've got a friend of mine who is a runner, and he had a goal to run every single day in a year. But he couldn't get there without saying, I'm going to get up, I'm going to get out of bed, I'm going to put on my running shoes, and I'm going to run today. And I'll worry about tomorrow. Is it raining out? Is it smoky out because of the fires and whatever? And he achieved that goal because of all the micro goals of doing that. He ran over 2,000 miles in 1 year. The guy's a machine. But and I tell my psoriasis clients too, it's like, okay, these are the things that you need to avoid eating. Just worry about today. Don't worry about tomorrow, but just manage it today. Manage it in this meal. Don't even worry about dinner. I'm not going to do that today in this meal.
I'm really, really loving this important tip that really does lead to resilience. I have been using this tip for so many years, decades really, where I gave myself permission to have small things matter. So Tom's a friend or client, whatever you said, who wants to run every day, getting out of bed, lacing up sneakers is on the way to the greater thing. I set a goal to walk a 5K a day. I'm a walker. I have a dog multiple times, so 3.1 is no problem for me. But my timing, my health, my focus, my commitment, all these things that lead to our resilience really happens from what we all talked about earlier, which is mindset transformation. It's really coming into this conscious awareness. And so I'm absolutely, again, an example where I wake up each day with an intense desire to focus on my mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. And, sometimes I fail. Sometimes I fail, Elizabeth. You talked about failure earlier, but it is the goal, Sophia, that you talk about. Who do I want to be? How do I want to live? How important is my Denise health and wellness to me? And Tom, how do I get there? What are the steps along the way? I want to ask if there's any guests that have any more questions, any comments you'd like to make. I appreciate your being here, and I want to make sure we get you in. Lori, anything on your mind? Or Lori, hold on one second. Elizabeth, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to tie back to Denise's book. So in Denise's book, she talks about measuring from our progress. So that's another way that we can have resilience when it comes to goals. So instead of measuring progress to the goal, which we're figuring out, like we have this ideal and the goalpost always moves, we'll have better resilience if we measure backwards from where we started. And so I just wanted to tie that back to the Living Healthy list as well.
Nice. Good one, Elizabeth. Lori, what's on your mind?
Great conversation. I've been taking a lot of notes and enjoying all of it. I question, because resiliency is based in energy, right? And I heard a lot of talk about the mind and the body and taking care of our health and wellness that way. But if we consider the fact that we are energy, and resiliency has a lot to do with how we feel, and how we feel is then determined and expressed through our emotions. What are any tips that you might have in terms of how the care and feeding of our resilient soul and that embodies who we are in authenticity, but also drives everything? Because if I'm soul weary, resiliency is a non-starter for me, right? Because there's nothing I want to do. And so when I was hearing you talk about goal setting, which is that was kind of my mind too, right? If I want to be resilient, I need to be resilient for something. I need to, where's my carrot that is saying, this is why you need to get up and do this and that. So I was just curious about the energetic point of view in terms of how we can be more resilient in our hearts and souls. So it then is tied and carried to our thoughts, which will then carry into our physical resiliency.
Thank you so much for this beautiful question. The basis of my confidence coaching is what I call soul connection. And so I'm very much, very deep in the work of exactly what you're talking about. And also full disclosure, as a human, I'm also very deep into how you work through the resistance of negative energy, some of which I happen to be experiencing right now, or resistant energy, to still resiliently move forth. Sophia, what are your thoughts about this? And by the way, for full disclosure, we have 4 minutes, so just want to keep us on track.
Yes, I'll be short. I'll be brief. I love this question. I believe that you have to find the things that you enjoy doing. If you enjoy being outside and that's what recharges you, go do that. If what recharges you is going shopping, go shopping. Just find those things in your life that do really recharge your soul. And for me, I know it's right after this, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to sit in the sun. Like, that is what recharges me. And so just finding those things that you enjoy. If you enjoy being with your grandkids, if you enjoy cooking foods made from scratch, go do it.
Wow, that was brief and awesome. I was still typing. Find the things you enjoy doing. When you are doing things that you enjoy, your soul is recharged. How much do I love that Sophia just gave us permission for shopping to be one of those things, right? That was awesome, because when we feel better, right, our soul rises, and we can rise to, Lori, those things that we do want to do. I'm totally a sun person as well, Sophia. Being out in nature, Lori, I don't even know what to call it, the secret, the foundation. Nature serves the soul and nature soothes the soul. I didn't know that in my early years, but it's been shown and proven to me over and over. So that's another place to start. Friends, we are just about at the end of our meaningful conversation. I want to thank everyone so much for being here today. Thank you to the panelists. You can find all of us on livinghealthylist.com. I want to let you know that we have an upcoming health and wellness Q&A Friday, July 15th at noon Central. This is such an important conversation with Dr. Sheila Craig Whiteman, who is a pelvic health specialist and coach. I also know Dr. Sheila. This is amazing stuff. I want to invite you to let all the women in your experience know about this very, very important and vital conversation. So Tom also just shared a resource with us, the 5-second rule. Thank you for that. It will stay in the comments. And I think we're done. We did it. To everyone, thank you again for joining us today. And we'll see you at the next meaningful conversation. Bye, everyone.